I just started recording. Ariel, you there? Anybody have Ariel as a teammate from Columbus? Oh, she's running late. Okay, sounds good. So anyway, from last week, I sent out the recordings. I don't know if you all had the opportunity to attend another live session or listen to a recording. So I hope you did either one of those. Okay. And let's see, what are my updates for this week before we get started? I sent you guys out a clarifying email announcement yesterday with regards to groups. Hannah, was that clear? Yes.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And so if some of you had sent me what your group wanted to do before I realized I had already assigned it. I started something new this term by just assigning an infectious disease because the last couple of terms have had a lot of repeats. A lot of groups are doing the same thing, so I wanted to kind of spread it out. So my apologies, I forgot about that. That I had already assigned you one. If you are one of the few groups that sent me a particular infectious disease, and I don't have a list of that here, but just keep working on it. Okay, just keep working on what you told me you were going to do. There wasn't that many groups that sent me an email. Otherwise, just go back to just use the one you were assigned. Does that make sense? Okay, and there was some confusion about, is it a paper or PowerPoint? So that's why I sent the clarifying. And everybody has to turn in the paper for infectious disease for you to get credit, right? Because it populates in your grade book. So I realize I'll be getting several of the same papers from each group member, and that's fine. But everybody needs to turn it in. Okay. What else did I send you? Recordings from last week. Oh, I sent you the study guide. Everybody see study guide number 2. Excuse me. Sorry. Study guide number 2. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hopefully that's helpful. Okay. The study guide was, I designed it with a few things in mind, with your lecture, right? Your lecture and your lecture notes, then your weekly notes that you get every week, and then the readings. So the study guide is a compilation of all of those. Okay, so if you have a good understanding of the study guide, that's a good indication that you're going to do well in the exam. Okay, so don't just use the study guide. Okay, the front page of the study guide says it all. It's not inclusive. Okay, if there are things you're not understanding on the study guide, please go back into the book or your notes or lecture and reread or re-listen. Okay, I should know today about the 2 reviews we're going to do Friday and Saturday. I think Dr. Kershaw is going to do one on Friday and I'm going to do one on Saturday. I haven't figured out the time yet because I have a couple of other meetings scheduled with the RN group that I'm just waiting to confirm times on. So Friday obviously is to try and catch the weekend group that works, and then Saturday for those that are not. So try and take advantage of one of those, okay, or both. Okay. You saw my correction about the reading. Instead of week 6, it's week 8. I've already made those corrections on the notes I have for you today. So everybody know what I'm talking about?
You're talking about the chapter for the reading.
Chapter, right. In the fundamentals book, it said chapter 6, pages 115 through 117. It's actually chapter 8. But everything else is the same. The pages are the same. The other readings are the same. It was just that 6 needs to go to 8. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
of course. Yeah.
For week 4 notes, we don't have them, I think. You didn't send them. week 4 notes.
Week
Can you?
4
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me check on that.
Thank you.
Let me check on that. I know that was your exam week. Okay, and then obviously next week's exam week, I will open up the exams to download probably Saturday morning, like I do during exam week, and then you need to download it before class. Okay. Any questions before we get started? Okay, all right. So do we know what we're covering today? Okay, we're going to cover occupational health and environmental health, health education, and well, barriers to learning, and then the nurse-patient relationship. I should probably add that in there. Did I spell that right? Relationship. I'm not a good speller. Okay. All right, so I'm going to cover, let's do environmental and occupational health first. Okay, and where that is covered, has anybody looked for this week? Where is that covered in your readings this week? Okay, it's not in the book. Okay, where is it covered? Anybody know?
It's in the modules
Thank
under
you. Yes, thank you. Okay, so week 6, it's right here. Okay, so it's one of your readings in the module. Okay, so that's where your reading is this week for occupational environmental health. It's covered quite nicely on our notes, but let's just review this. Okay. Actually, I'm going to do it the other way. I did it the other way with the group yesterday. This is more of a summary. So let's go to our notes. So I'm in the week 6 notes. Okay. Chapters 8 and 9 are the next 2 subjects we'll cover: the communication and the nurse-patient relationship and patient education. So when you guys think of environmental health, what do you think of? Environmental risks, environmental health, environmental issues. What do you guys think of? What comes to mind?
you know, things that can happen in the environment, maybe like with certain jobs or whatever.
Okay. That's good. That's a good start. I'm just going to grab myself a tissue. 1 second, guys. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I seem to be more, for lack of a better term, we're all nurses, more junky in the morning with this COVID. Okay, so environmental health. Tasha started us off, but think about in your environment where you currently live. Think about all the exposures and risks that we have on any given day, any hour of the day. Think about air pollution. We think about water contamination. We think about contaminated soil, contaminated food, or potential of. Okay, we think of where we live, Do we live near an airport? Do we live near a railroad? Do we live near in an industrial geographic area? Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but I just take for granted that somebody's checking on everything, like the air quality, the water quality, the sewage quality, trash pickup, right? But think about all the environmental risks that are around us. Okay, we know that environmental hazards are responsible for over 1/2 of the disease in the world, and they contribute to 80% of communicable and non-communicable diseases. That's a lot, right? I mean, think about it. Old buildings, we're going to cover all this. I'm just doing a kind of an introduction. Old buildings that may have lead, schools, old schools that may have lead or asbestos or God knows what else. Okay. Why do we think that, and we talk about vulnerable populations all through this term, all through this class, why do we think that vulnerable populations, maybe socioeconomic issues, derive a lot of these environmental risks? Give me some examples of why maybe living in poverty increases your risk for being exposed to environmental issues. What do you think?
It's because maybe those populations that that live in low income areas, those areas don't tend to be like renewed often or worked on often because there's no money in that area to fix the property that's in that area.
Exactly. An example would be crowded living conditions, right? Maybe people who live in impoverished neighborhoods live near hazardous waste sites. Maybe they don't have the opportunity to have all the food choices that their counterparts have, right? Maybe they have jobs that expose them to environmental hazards. Living in older homes with lead-based paint. And as we mentioned, living in districts where schools older schools and daycare facilities that are older. And there may even be a genetic predisposition. Autism, asthma. Think about asthma is the most common childhood ailment. And a lot of asthma comes from environmental hazards. Right? So when you're talking to, remember, we're in community now. So your client can be the individual, a family, or a subset of the community, right? So when we're doing environmental risk assessments, we need to, and you're the excuse me, and you're the community health nurse, where do they live, where do they work, where do they go to school, where do they send their kids to school, dietary history. Why is it important to get a dietary history with regards to environmental health? And I'll be more specific. Why do we want to know about fish intake? What's in fish that is potential environmental exposure? If it's in too high of levels.
Is it the lead?
The mercury.
Mercury, yeah.
Right? So if they eat a lot of fish, fine. Where do they get their fish? Do they get their fish at the grocery store? Do they get their fish in the lake or the river? Okay. Pesticides. You know, we talk in previous weeks, we've talked about pesticide exposure on the farm and rural communities. But that's not the only place you can be exposed to pesticides. Right? We have cleaning or we have cleaning supplies all around our houses, all around our work environment. Right? I'm going to take this out because this doesn't refer to. So what do we want to know from families when we're doing a risk exposure? Have they had past exposures? What are their past jobs? Have they lived? I mean, we need a history, right? So maybe we do a windshield. Maybe we do a windshield survey in the community. If we're talking about the community as a whole for environmental risk, what's a windshield survey? You guys know what a windshield survey is? Windshield survey is doing a survey through your windshield, whether you're driving around in your car, whether you're driving around in a bus, whether you're walking around, whether you're riding your bike, you're seeing the community through a lens. Okay, what's in the community? Are there factories? Are there dump sites? Is it a major transportation hub? Buses, trains, planes? Is it an older community with older buildings? Are there environmental issues with, let's say, rodents or insects? So if you think about it, we are exposed to so much, right, in the environment. Who makes sure our air quality is at acceptable levels? Who makes sure our water supply is acceptable? Look what happened in Flint 3 or 4 years ago with the contaminated water. Soil, if your community is building lots of new subdivisions, has somebody tested the soil to make sure that where they're building wasn't on a previous land site or a previous plant? Okay, so there's lots of things you don't think about. So think in your communities, I'm just curious, what kinds of environmental risks do you face? What are some other environmental risks from where you live?
I do know around Columbus, in the area where I live, they're doing a lot of building.
Okay. So, you know, hopefully, what's the big organization, what's the federal agency that oversees environmental health? Anybody know? It's called the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. It is a huge federal agency that's responsible for environmental health or environmental protection. Okay. We talked about lead-based paint. Lead-based paint was used in homes before 1978. And what's the risk? Paint chips around the house, it's on the windowsills, right? It's on the floor. Right? So it's a risk for young kids that may eat paint chips. Right? Maybe renovations cause lead. Exposures come from renovations done on homes, schools, and daycare facilities that were built before 78. Obviously, there are very strict codes and guidelines now for building codes about lead-based paint. Right? So that the paint can lead to kids getting in their respiratory tracts, in their mouths. Okay, pregnant moms with lead exposure can lead to premature births, learning disabilities. Okay, and then pesticides, we talked about that. So we're going to expand the discussion of pesticides outside the farming in rural communities. Right? We know pesticides are used, like I said, in our homes, schools, daycares, hospitals, lawn care, farms. Okay. Then there are man-made exposures, chemical exposures that are found in our own bodies. Okay. We know the kids are much more at risk and susceptible to the effects of chemical exposures, especially during fetal development. Okay. We talk about water, right? The current statistics tell us that 30 million Americans drink water that does not meet the EPA safe water drinking standards. That's a lot. Right? We know that the quality of water is tied to the quality of the soil and vice versa. Right? The quality of soil. So we think of environmental, we think of four things. We think air, water, soil, and food. Those are the four main environmental factors we think about. Okay, so we're talking about water now. Water is contaminated, right? Contaminated by antibiotics, hormones in our meat animals. Okay. Think of has anybody seen the movie Erin Brockovich?
I can't remember. I've seen it, but it was a long time ago. I can't quite remember what it was about.
Anybody know what Erin Brockovich is about? Erin Brockovich. Go ahead. Erin Brockovich is about a water treatment plant that leaked contaminated stuff into the water in a little town, I think in Texas, and people started getting sick. It was PG&E from California, I believe. It's a great movie, and perfectly encapsulates the risks, environmental risks. And in this particular case, it was about water contamination. Okay. And then we talked about air, right? 50% of Americans live in areas where the air quality doesn't meet the standards. That's a lot. Motor vehicles are the greatest single source of pollution, followed by the burning of fossil fuels. Okay. What can air pollution be associated with? Asthma, respiratory disease, cardiovascular. This is right in your notes. Cancer, immune system issues, reproductive health problems. And then what about inside air quality? We've talked a lot about outside, but what about inside air quality? What kinds of things affect that quality of air? Carbon monoxide, dust, molds, pets, cleaning products, personal care products, and certainly tobacco smoke. So there's lots of risks for indoor air quality as well. And then food contamination. I take for granted. I take for granted that if I go to a fast food restaurant or if I go to a restaurant, I take for granted that everything is being prepared as it should. Employees are washing their hands, clean spaces. Do you guys take that for granted?
Yes, I think we all do.
I do. And so I had a situation when one of my kids was like 6 years old. Years ago, we went to a restaurant and he had uncooked chicken in the chicken fingers, and he actually got salmonella. And so it happens, but we do take that for granted. Okay. We know that not only does food include some pathogens, right? But we have to also be wary, mindful of the training and the performance of people preparing our food. Okay. A couple of definitions here. Toxicology. Toxicology is a study of health effects associated with chemical exposures. So when you've been exposed, or you always hear waiting on toxicology results. Well, that is trying to determine what you've been exposed to. And then the other definition here is epidemiology, right? Which determines what are the health effects of environmental exposures. What is the incidence of the disease and how is it related to the environmental exposure? And I bet you all didn't know that you are entitled to know about what risks, environmental risks, may be associated with the community that you live in. Okay, consumer confidence reports. If you go into the EPA's website, okay, I'm in number 12 here. If you go into the EPA's website and plug in your zip code, okay, you can access information about air or water quality, what risks your zip code is at or has. So, yeah. So environmental risks, environmental health is part of our everyday lives, and that goes for everybody, right? So as a community nurse, we need to be mindful of the community we live in or the community we work in, and what kinds of environmental risks are associated with that. Okay, and how can we educate, right? I'm thinking primary, secondary, tertiary now. How can we educate people on the prevention of things before they happen? So lead exposure, how can we, I'm just giving an example, how can we educate parents on the prevention of lead exposure? Secondary, are there certain populations that we need to screen in our community that may be at higher risk for environmental issues? Are there people that work at the local power plant or at the local, manufacturing plant that might be at higher risk? And then tertiary. Let's say they've developed a condition or a disease from an environmental exposure. Let's just say asthma. How do we continue to educate that group of people on how to manage their asthma, how to reduce the side effects or reduce the illness? Okay, so does that make sense with environmental health?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to skip down. I'm going to skip down to occupational health. What's occupational health? What's occupational health? If you're working as an occupational health nurse in the community, what are you doing? What are you responsible for? Well, think about it. What's occupational health? It's the workplace, right? Every place you work now, any one of you has either an occupational health nurse or an occupational health department. If you work in a large facility, there's probably an occupational health team. And what do occupational health, what is their job?
Is to make sure that the area you work in is safe for you to, it's a safe environment for you to work in.
Exactly, exactly. So occupational health nurses have lots of roles, okay? They are a very important part of the team at your company, at your hospital, at your facility, okay? They're the ones that need to be aware of what exactly people do in your facility. Are they working with heavy machinery that might be a potential risk for, say, an accident, or if it's a loud facility, hearing issues, right? They need to know what people's job descriptions are. Are you working, or do you need to be using PPE in your job? Okay, what's your job description? And they should be trying to sort out what the risks are, because they need to provide education to prevent workplace injuries, right? They need to screen employees that might be at risk. You know, if you're working in a job that requires heavy lifting and you have previous back issues, well, that employee might be at risk for back injuries, right? The goal is to reduce absenteeism, right? And going back to tertiary, so I've given you a primary example, educating employees how to prevent injuries. Screening is screening, like I said, somebody working with heavy equipment that has back issues. That's a problem. And then tertiary, let's say you have a certain group of people that are missing a lot of work, and it turns out that they're diabetic. Okay, maybe they need more education on how to manage their diabetes so that they can come to work. Okay. So a lot of times the occupational nurses will function as a case manager. Okay. And if you work in large organizations, you have case managers. Case managers are the coordinators of care. Okay. There's a lot of coordination to do with occupational health. If you've had an on-the-job injury, you have to work with HR, family medical leave, if that's the direction it's going, PT, okay, getting back to work. All right, so the occupational health nurses have expanded, their role has expanded tremendously. Okay, so they may, like I said, case managers, it's a coordinator of care. So they may be coordinating and managing the care of ill or injured workers. Okay, they may be a counselor and for crisis intervention. Think about the worker that goes to work every day. Okay, think about some of the issues they may be having outside of work: financial, emotional, personal, family. Okay, people come to work with those issues all the time. Okay, mental health support has never been more important in the workplace setting. Okay, often occupational health nurses are working with employees with substance abuse issues, intense psychological needs, maybe obesity, chronic diseases, because people bring those to work. They have those when they come to work. Okay, so occupational health nurses have a huge responsibility. Think of all the things, issues, health concerns that people come to work with. Okay. Occupational health nurses also try to focus as much as they can on health promotion and risk reduction. They may provide programs with regards to, I don't know, positive lifestyle, health and wellness. We've all seen the health and wellness in services being offered. That comes from the occupational health department. Their goal is to keep people healthy so they can work. Okay, they may do education for parents on immunizations, personal health, smoking cessation programs for people who smoke, exercise, fitness, education, nutrition, weight control. I'm just giving some examples of education that the occupational nurse provides. Okay. So who monitors, everybody's heard of OSHA, right? Everybody flips out when OSHA is going to do a visit, right? Anybody ever been in that situation? OSHA's coming, OSHA's coming. Yeah, Tasha. What's OSHA? It's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, but what do they do?
They come in and make sure that the hospital is, living up to those guidelines to keep the patients and their workers safe.
Exactly. I call OSHA the enforcers. Okay, so the federal government develops guidelines for occupational safety in the workplace. Okay, they develop a broad set of guidelines. It's up to each state to implement depending on the setting. Is it a school? Is it a hospital? Is it a Starbucks? Is it whatever it is? There's a set of occupational safety rules that everybody has to follow, right? We all see in the bathrooms, employees must wash their hands before they go back to work, and your MSDS sheets in the hospital, right, where all the chemicals are located. These are all safety safety issues that must be addressed in the workplace setting. Okay, so OSHA, that one or two ways, they will come and do their unannounced regular visits to make sure all the regulations are in place. Okay, or OSHA also functions if there are issues. If there's been an accident, if there's been a series of events that have caused harm to employees or patients, clients. Okay, they come in and do the investigation. What was going on at the time, and what worked and what didn't work. Okay. So OSHA is a really, really important part of occupational health. Okay. So additional roles of the occupational health nurse: recognizing and identifying hazards. Okay, we talked about that. You got to know your people's job descriptions. What are we asking people to do? And have we provided them the education and the tools needed to perform their job in a safe way? Okay. A couple of examples of primary, secondary, and tertiary. Right? Maybe primary, you're teaching coping mechanisms, providing healthy diet education, educating on the use of ergonomic lifting. I know in the school district I retired from, we had a whole health and wellness department. They offered things like this all the time to better your workplace experience. Secondary, screening for hearing loss, let's say, again, you work in a plant that's very noisy. You got to be able to, those employees are at risk for hearing loss. Blood pressure screenings, screening for stress and burnout. Right? And then tertiary, let's say somebody's had an injury or somebody has a chronic condition. Excuse me. You have to work with that. They already have the illness or they already have the injury. So what do? Can they come back to work but go on limited duty? Where could they work in the organization when they come back if they have to be on limited duty? So these are all the things the occupational nurse has to figure out. Okay. Let's jump to our page in the module and see what we didn't cover. Okay, why isn't that working? Okay, so we've talked about this. Occupational and environmental health nursing is a specialty that provides for and delivers health and safety programs to workers, worker population, and community groups. So occupational health, environmental health primarily focuses on promotion and restoration of health, prevention of illness and injury, and protection from work-related hazards. Okay. Here's an interesting fact. Poor employee health costs businesses over $1 trillion annually. So businesses are very interested in working with your environmental and occupational nurses to maximize productivity and minimize risk. We talked about this, occupational environmental nurses today, case managers, right? The coordination of care, counseling, crisis intervention, health promotion. They need to be aware of the legal and regulatory statutes and laws because they're responsible for making sure they comply. And then, as we've talked about, worker and workplace hazard detection. They have to be able to identify and monitor hazards and potential exposures. Okay. And I like this. You can read this on your own, but it's the standards of occupational and environmental health nursing. This is an excellent transition into your ADPI, your nursing process, with regards to how is that performed, how is that done in occupational environmental health nursing. So this is your ADPI. Okay, so please have a look at this part right here. Okay. Okay, questions on occupational and environmental nursing. Let's cover next, let's go to chapter 8, and let's cover the communication and the nurse-patient relationship. Okay, I'm going to go to the book here. Okay, I am going to page 115 because that's what it says we're supposed to do for our reading. Okay, so we're supposed to cover 115 to 117. Okay, so the nurse-patient relationship. This is both in the book and in your notes. We'll just quickly go through what's in the book that I want you to know. If I've highlighted it in yellow, that's important because that part supports understanding the concept of the nurse-patient relationship. Okay. Why is the nurse-patient relationship important?
Because they will get more information from the patient if the patient trusts nurse.
Correct. Correct. Nurse, Daria, you're not driving, are you? Daria? Are you
Yes, but I'm
driving?
about to pull over to my daughter's appointment. She's about to get out.
Nurse-patient relationship is one of the most important foundational aspects of our profession, right? We have to be able to have a relationship with our patients so that we can talk about goals, outcomes, plans of care, right? Part of what we as nurses need to be able to have with these relationships, in these relationships, is empathy, becoming non-judgmental, maintaining hope. Okay. I want you to review this box for nurse-patient communication. It's on page 115. Okay. These are CUSIN. CUSIN is all over our 6th edition or our newer editions for these books. CUSIN stands for quality, safety, and education in nursing. You're going to hear me mention that a lot. Okay, they're competencies. CUSIN is competencies. Obviously, we as nurses have to have we have to be competent to function in our role. So here's a good list. They're called KSAs. Okay. Knowledge, skill, and attitudes. Okay, here's how we get to be competent. Knowledge, skills, attitudes. Here's a beginning list of what we should be able to be competent in. Look at the attitudes. Can you see the situation through the patient's eyes? Are you able to value the patient's knowledge of their own health? Are you able to step back and recognize your own attitudes about working with patients from different cultures, ethnicities, social backgrounds? Do you value the relationship with the patient? Do you respect patients' beliefs and practices? Okay, these are all things that need to be developed in order to be competent in caring for our patients. And then you can read what's in the knowledge and the skills boxes. I'm just going through a couple more groups that we need to be focused on. Okay, how do you communicate with a hearing impaired patient? How do you communicate with a visually impaired patient? Okay. How do you communicate with a phasic patient? These are all things to think about. Okay. And then how do you communicate with older adults and children? So just have a read through this. It's only a couple of pages, but I'd like for you to be able to articulate maybe in one sentence, what's the most important thing to do with communicating with older adults? What's the most important thing to do with communicating with kids? Okay. And then what are some attributes that we must practice in our relationships? Empathy, non-judgment, and maintaining hope. Okay. Let's see what we got in our notes here. I think it's, let's see. Bear with me. I think that's covered in the book. Okay, so that part of the learning, that topic is covered in the book. So page 115 to 117. Okay, the last topic to cover is today is chapter 9. Okay, it technically says you're responsible for the whole chapter. Okay, patient education and health promotion. This is where I want to focus some attention on. Okay, most of what we do in community nursing is patient education and health promotion. Okay, so I've gone through, I'm going to start with the book, go through the book in the areas I've highlighted that are important to understand the concept of patient education. Okay, and then we'll go over to our notes. The notes are pretty detailed this week. Right, so what is the purpose? What's the goal of patient education? It's right here highlighted. Prevention of illness, promotion of wellness, and the restoration of health. Think of what we teach. We teach about everything. We teach about prevention. We teach about risk. We teach about disease. We teach about everything. Surgery, pre-op for surgery, discharge planning. Okay. So a couple of things we need to know. There's 3 modes of learning. I'm on page 125. We need to know what the 3 modes of learning are: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Okay. What kind of a learner are you? I'm kinesthetic. I like hands-on. I don't want my kids telling me how to download an app over the phone. Just here's my phone, do it for me. Or let me do it. Stand there and tell me what to do. I can't learn auditorily. I mean, I can, but not preferably. When somebody's giving me directions on how to do something and I'm hearing it, I just shut down. I want hands-on training or hands-on learning. What about you guys? How do you guys learn?
I like hands-on too.
Okay. Anybody
I do
else?
as well. Hands-on.
Hands-on. But we need to consider we're going to have clients that learn all 3 different ways. So are we prepared to teach in 3 different ways? Right. Well, obviously, when we're doing our assessment, the rest of this chapter goes through, nicely lays out the nursing process, your ADPI, and starts with assessment. Well, we can't do any kind of teaching until we know what the patient needs to learn. Right. And then each part of the ADPI, as it goes through in the book, gives you tools. So everything under this is, everything under assessment is some teaching tools, some learning tools. What are some factors that might affect learning? Okay, look at box 9.2. Maybe insufficient knowledge. We use the terms health literate, health illiterate. Health illiterate doesn't, it's not derogatory. It just means that they don't have a lot of knowledge. Okay, maybe inadequate health maintenance, health management, they're fall risk. They're not able to care for themselves. I mean, there's many, many reasons, barriers that might affect teaching and learning. You have to do your assessment and figure out what they are. Are they ready to learn? Okay. And then here's a nice box of considerations when teaching older adults. Here's some suggestions. They're a different population. They require a different approach, as do kids. Okay. Next, we get into the education plan, right? So in order to even do an education plan with a client or a family or a subset of the community, you have to analyze your assessment data. We're talking about the nursing process. Establish your objectives or goals. All right, create a plan for them to meet their goals. And remember, when you're coming up with objectives with the client, behavioral objectives are important as well. What's a behavioral objective? It's what the client indicates is the desired change that they would like. So it's one thing to have objectives, but they need to be measured. Behavioral objectives measure that. What are the desired specific changes you want? Okay. Then it talks about implementing your plan, evaluating your plan and documentation. Okay. There's one part I missed up here that I want to go back and cover. There's 3 ways we learn, domains for learning. Does anybody know what those are? Oh, I don't think it's in here. I think it's in our notes. There's 3 ways we learn, or 3 domains of learning: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Okay, that's in our notes. We'll go through that. Cognitive is the thinking part of learning. Affective is the feeling part of learning. And the psychomotor is doing, the teach back. Okay, we'll go through that a little bit more when we get to the notes. Okay, I want to point out at the end of this chapter, have some 2 excellent resources. You should review it. Okay, key points. So as we're getting ready for next gen in your NCLEX, they break it down here. Key points from this chapter. This is an excellent summary of the chapter. Okay, talks about how to work with auditory learners, visual learners. Okay, and it goes through the chapter. And then the other excellent resource for you guys is the review questions for next gen. Do these questions. As I told my group yesterday, I am a firm believer in 3 things for learning. One is anytime you can look at rationales, wherever they come from, questions, case studies, whatever, NCLEX, rationales are critical to learning. Okay. The second thing that I think is critical to learning is case studies. The more case studies you can get your hands on and do, I think the better prepared you'll be. All these chapters in these books have case studies and self-guided, self-directed exercises that you can do. Okay, and third is questions. Like this, review questions, questions and questions and questions. That's why we have you do NCLEX. You do 200 NCLEX questions during the term. Anytime you can do questions and get rationales and correct answers and why is this correct, why is this incorrect? Those, to me, are the 3 most important tools for learning. That's why if you send me an NCLEX, if you submit your NCLEX and you have a low score, I'm sending it right back to you or reopening it and saying, redo it. If you want, you don't have to, but redo it because you missed a lot of rationales. You got a lot of questions wrong, and meaning you got a lot of rationales sent back to you. Read those rationales, try and get some better understanding, and then retake it. Okay, so that's my mantra on. And then here's your case studies or clinical judgment activities. Okay. I don't know if you guys study in groups. These are excellent scenarios to present in your group. Talk about it based on what you learned from this chapter. Let's cover, the last part is just covering what we haven't covered from the book. Right, so we're health education. So we know that patient education is the most important role of the nurse. I don't know what the percentage is, but I know working as a school nurse, working in the schools for 20 years, I'd say 80 to 90% of my job was education. Okay, we use our education to promote health, prevent illness and injury, improve behaviors, teach and enable patients to care for their families with health conditions. What we know with health promotion is when patients take personal responsibility for their health, they're much more effective at making changes and maintaining those changes. And education empowers patients with knowledge and motivation to hopefully help them take some personal responsibility. Nurses should be educating in every role they work in. Is there anybody in this group, in your employment, wherever you work, that's not doing some kind of education? Everybody's doing some kind of education, aren't we? Healthy People 2030 has lots and lots of goals and objectives directly related to education. And it talks about preventing the goals and objectives, preventing conditions, reducing risks, and promoting healthier lifestyles. Right? So we already reviewed this part. To educate, we need to understand how they learn. Okay? So here's your visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Okay? But what I want you to understand is that most people learn through 3 different ways or domains. Okay, they're called domains, which are there are 3 different learning domains used for learning. So each of us, we all have all 3: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Okay, so these are all in play when we're trying to learn. Okay, so as I said, the cognitive is the thinking part of the person, the ability to hear or read information, understand and memorize it, thinking, right? And then use to solve problems. Your affective domain is the feeling. Okay, what are your attitudes? What are your beliefs? Okay, these affect your ability to learn. Your feelings. And then psychomotor, right? Which is the hands-on. Learning a skill or through practice and experience. Maybe learning how to use a glucometer or teaching the patient how to use a glucometer. Okay, so when you're educating, if you don't address all these 3 domains, it may not be as effective. Think about it. If you telling someone to change without motivating them or giving them the tools is not going to be as effective. And then the next part of your notes goes through the nursing process. Okay. What kinds of assessments do you do before you begin? All right, what do they already know? What your assessment of a clinical patient in the hospital is much different than your assessment of a client or a family of a group in the community that you're doing education for. Totally different. Okay, and here's some things to think of during your assessment phase. What do they believe about the condition? What do they know? Do they seem motivated to learn? Are they health literate enough to understand what you're saying? Literacy is really important. Okay, can they understand the basic health information that can allow them to make appropriate decisions or choices? Can they read? Can they write? And in the planning phase, what kind of goals do you create? This should be working with the patient together, establishing goals. How do you create an environment that's conducive to learning? And here's some bullets about that. Patient needs to be comfortable, well rested, without emotional disturbance, medicate in advance if appropriate, right? Do they need hearing or visual aids? Okay. Complete your assessment. What do they know? What do they don't know? What's the most important thing for them to know? Include the patient in your planning. Okay. Some people receive information best in small chunks. Present calmly in an unhurried manner. Right? If you appear to be hurried, the patient may not ask the questions they want to ask. You want them to feel like you're truly present in the current situation. Okay. Maybe play techniques are helpful when you're teaching children. Use toys and dolls. Patients that have low literacy, you may need to use very, very basic language. Okay. What do you do if the patient is not ready to or willing to learn? Well, we start with the nurse-patient relationship. What is the most important thing that we need to do with any kind of patient relationship, any kind of encounter? What do we first have to do?
We have to build some type of rapport with them, build some type of trust, some type of relationship.
Exactly. Trust, comfort, trust. And I talk about the importance of building trust when we talk about the vulnerable populations. Let's say you're working with a homeless population, a homeless family. Do you think they're going to be willing to go ahead with what you want them to do, or try and do an assessment if they don't trust you? Of course not. Trust is the most important thing in our nurse-patient relationship. If that's not established right off the bat, then it's going to be challenging, right? They need to trust you. They need to respect you, right? They're much more open. They will be much more open to talk if they know you're respectful, if they know you're non-judgmental, if they feel like they can trust you. And that comes with being authentic, understanding what their cultural beliefs and values are and how that affects the treatment plan. Right? You have to be culturally competent, culturally aware, culturally sensitive. Their culture may influence many things in their treatment plan: diet, lifestyle, health-related behavior. Okay. And then finally, how do we evaluate the outcomes of our teaching, our education? Well, evaluation should be an ongoing process, right? Maybe you're using the teach back method, where you're asking them to demonstrate skills back to you. Maybe ask them if they understand what you've just taught them. Pre-post surveys, exams, whatever. or not exams, but screenings? Did they learn what the goals and objectives were? And then asking for feedback. Speaking of asking for feedback, one of the things I forgot to mention at the beginning of class is you guys, we'll be done a little bit early. Okay, after we do our attestation. The one thing I would greatly appreciate is to use the gift of time that I give you back this morning with going into your shell. We'll be in your shell because we're going to do the attestation, but I really want you guys to fill out the midterm evaluation. It's right in your shell. Okay, feedback. Okay, I'm teaching you. I need feedback. Okay, am I meeting your needs? Okay, am I meeting your expectations? Are you learning in this class? Am I presenting it okay? So I need feedback from you. And for the university. You know, what do you think about the class? What do you think about the instructor? So I'm gonna push you guys to do that because I thrive on feedback, right? Do I need to change course? Do I need to implement new teaching strategies to meet your needs? Okay. So sorry to get off on that tangent, but when I saw feedback, I want feedback from you guys. Okay. And then nurses, document, document, document. If it's not documented, it's not done. Right? And let's just go through some primary examples, secondary examples, tertiary examples of education. Why don't you guys tell me, what are some primary intervention examples for teaching without reading this? What are some examples?
Education on, I guess you can teach like young girls education on like contraceptive.
Exactly.
To help with, teenage pregnancy.
Yep, exactly. Excellent idea. Anybody else? What about teaching parents about immunizations? Teaching parents about safety? What's primary? Prevent something before it even happens. What are some examples of secondary prevention for education? The example they give here is teaching an elderly woman the signs and symptoms of a UTI. Right? She's at higher risk for UTI. So we've identified our risk patient and done some teaching. Right? Screening for high risk and educating. Tertiary. Maybe you're teaching about a low sodium diet to a patient who has high blood pressure. Maybe you're demonstrating the use of a glucometer to a diabetic. Okay. And this is interesting. Learning has not occurred until your behavior has changed. Okay, we know that behavioral changes are hard. We know it's our human nature takes us to the path of least resistance and habitual behaviors. Does anybody work with anybody or even have a family member who falls into that category? The resistance to change, it's hard. Does anybody work with somebody that says, yeah, I know they just did research and the best practice is now to do this with this patient, but or let's just keep it the way it is. Anybody work with somebody like that?
Yes.
Yeah, we all do. I have family members like that. Okay. It's hard, but you need to be mindful of it. You need to be mindful of some of the barriers that are going to be put up when you're trying to do your education. Even if it's with a coworker, even if it's a family member of one of your clients. Okay. So those are the topics covered today. If you guys could turn your cameras on, Jen, don't worry about it. Or Jenny. So, lots of topics, but good information. Did you learn about occupational and environmental health? What do you think? Patient education, communication, relationship building with patients. Give me your thoughts. And again, I'm trying to expand your knowledge of what the community nurse's role is. That's simply what this class is about. Is all the different areas, hats that they wear, just expanding your knowledge that a community health nurse isn't simply a home health nurse that goes out and does a visit. So tell me what you think of today's information. Helpful?
Yeah, I thought it was really helpful. I never really thought about community nursing like that. I guess you do it kind of unconsciously when you working with your patients, but I never put it all together like this. No, I haven't.
Yeah, so think about this. It doesn't matter what kind of nursing that you eventually go into or you stay in, where you're currently working. You're always going to be interacting in one way or another with a community nurse or somebody in the community about something, whether it's discharge planning, whether it's school, your kid's school. You're always going to be in the community role is always intertwined into many areas of nursing, right? And so my goal is to simply expand your mind, expand your thinking of, I think community nurses rock. I've been a community nurse for 20 something years, so I'm a little biased, but my goal is to expand your thinking. Like Tasha just said, I never thought of the community nurse in this way. My goal, this class, is to teach you how community nursing needs to be integrated with other kinds of nursings, because we're all working as one big team. You may be taking care of the patient who had a stroke in the hospital, but you're discharging that patient to me. So you're working with the community nurse, right? You're coming up with goals and you're looking at your nursing process for the transition of hospital to home or nursing home to home or home to nursing home. Okay. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So let's pull up our attestation, because I'm tired of chasing people around for attestations. If we're in class, let's just do it and submit it. That way I don't have to chase you. Okay. So attestation for today is Marvel. I don't even know what the date is. 16th. What's the date? 16th. Marvel 16th. Okay. And hit submit. Okay. Let's see, it's 8:25. So I'm going to give you some time, gift of time. Okay. But please, in fact, we could sit here and do it together. Hey, I have a question. I have a couple of students telling me that they're seeing in their calendar that quiz 3 wasn't due till like next week and quiz 4 wasn't due to the following week. Are you seeing the correct due dates? That quiz 3 was, most of you did it, was due in week 5 and quiz 4 is due this week, right? You guys are seeing that, right?
Yeah, that's what I see.
Yeah. So I'm just asking, where might these students be seeing different due dates? Do you guys have another calendar or? I mean, because when I set up the shell, I put in the due dates and
On
Yes.
mine, like in the modules, it says that quiz 4 is due August 22nd.
yeah, well, wait, is that Sunday? Yeah, well. So for example, I'm going to share my screen for a minute. I'm just asking you guys to help me problem solve. Let me see. Okay, let's go back to the module. Okay, so if I go to week 5, right, quiz 3 was due Sunday, right? 2 days ago, right? Quiz 4 is due this Sunday, 21st. And if I go into my student view, right, this is what I see in your view. So week 5, right here, is quiz 3, is due on the 14th. And this week, quiz 4 is due on the 21st. So that's what you're seeing, right? So what am I missing? Where might I have put in an incorrect? I've already checked all my shells. Is there some other calendar that you guys go by or some other place that you look for due dates that I've
The
made?
syllabus, I just checked the syllabus though, and it says week 5, quiz 3, and week 6, quiz 4.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
checked
not,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm
so the
just-
syllabus is fine too, so I don't
okay.
know.
So, okay, I'll sort it out, but I just wanted to ask that. Okay, so everybody hit submit under attestation. Okay, so I'm done. I'm not going to keep you on, but I would ask that in the next 20 minutes, please, if you could do the midterm evaluation for me. I love feedback. I want to make sure I'm meeting you guys' needs. Okay? It would be appreciative. If you don't, I understand, but I'm not begging. But it would be helpful to me. Okay, questions, you guys. Jenny, I hope you feel better. I'm going to continue to try and recover. I'm going to go see my grandson this afternoon, which I'm thrilled about. I've been darn sick with COVID. I hope you guys all have a really good week, and please reach out if you need anything. Okay, I'll get you, well, I'm going to get you 2 things. I'm going to get you week 4 notes. And I'm going to get you the dates for the reviews for the rest of the week, at the end of the week. Is there anything else I need to get you guys? All right. So have a really good rest of the day. Have a really great week. You guys know where to find me to reach out. And remember, this is a team effort. We're all going to get over the finish line together. Okay. You guys got to let me know what you need from me. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You guys are doing awesome. Really proud of you.
Thank you. Enjoy your
Thank
day.
you.
All right. We'll see you later. Bye.
I hope you feel better and your grandbaby is okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.